Welcome to the Level Design Podcast. In this episode, we are joined by Media Molecule's own Peter Field. We talk about Dreams, Uncharted 3, The Last of Us, and a hidden gem called Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. Let's get on with the show. Hello everyone, I am Valentina Chrysostomou and welcome to this episode. You might have noticed that I am not Mark, our usual host. That is because Mark is being lazy and doing some kind of holiday thing, which means he's taking the back seat just for this episode. How is the view from back there, Mark?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm looking at palm trees, having pina coladas. It's been a lovely staycation in the garden.
Sounds very tropical.
Sounds nice. I mean, if you warm up your PC enough, it can be tropical anyway.
Well, most importantly, we've got with us principal designer at Media Molecule, Peter Field. Peter, it's lovely to have you here with us.
Thank you.
How is the view from where you are?
It's rainy. We live in Lancashire, so it always rains. It's just constantly raining. But yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, you've been busy with this glorious game that is Dreams. I hope everybody heard of it. But before we get into that, I just would love to hear how you got into game development. What kicked off your career?
So, I think I've always kind of been drawn to games just because they felt like it was a more experimental space than a lot of the other sort of art forms that really sort of caught my eye when I was a teenager. So when I was at school, I wasn't really sure. I knew I wanted to do something to do with art, maybe, but I wasn't at all sure what. And then I sort of decided really late in the day, and I changed my sort of applications to universities on like the final day to go and study games. And I think it was just because it felt like there was more possibilities. It was a more experimental art form than, say, like music and films, which are amazing and they're a big part of my life, but they're not. They've got a more set formula. And I initially wanted to go into being a games artist, and then I went to university and studied game art and realized that I was much more passionate about the design side of things than a lot of my other colleagues at university, and they were much more passionate about the art. They were like, we want this art style, and I'm like, you can do whatever you want. I'm not particularly bothered by that, but we have to put this mechanic in here. And then like you just sort of follow your gut. I think you listen to what your gut tells you, and you follow that, and you'll always sort of end up doing a job that you feel fulfilled by. So that's how I started getting into design.
What games were you playing just before like you made that decision to like switch into game development and stuff?
So I know I played Portal, and
Right.
It was completely formative because I think as a mechanic, it is probably one of the most perfect mechanics that I've ever sort of come across. And I remember sort of like putting together this like this pitch for a mechanic for one of our projects, and then Portal came out and I played it, and my tutor was like, it's in next week, and I'm like, yeah, but I have to start again because I just played this game and it's like completely blown everything that I've ever seen before out of the water, and I need to like completely go back to square one and like redo this whole project because it's just not good enough now. I've seen the light. So I think that was quite a big part of it. Yeah.
So Portal was really inspiring, I guess. Did Portal inspire you later on in your career too? Or did you move on to any other new games after that?
I think in terms of mechanics, it's definitely been pivotal. I think it's definitely the kind of game that I like to play because it's really short. It's really it's like a complete package, but it's quite short, and I don't often find that like long games attract me. Much less so now that I have a family and I have less time to sort of devote to games. But I very much enjoy sort of games that kind of respect your time. So they have something to say and they say it, and then they don't carry on after that point, if you know what I mean. I think that's really, really like elegant design. But I've more been drawn to sort of narrative action adventure sort of games, especially at the start of my career. So we worked on Enslaved, which was very much the kind of game that I was like looking to work on. And I got to be a level designer on that, and then from there, me and another designer who was like the lead designer at Ninja Theory at the time, he went to Naughty Dog and I went to Naughty Dog completely separately, but like at the same time, and we both worked on the same kind of games there as well. And that was very much my bread and butter for a long time. And And then I've completely thrown that all out the window with Media Molecule, which has been very refreshing and interesting.
Well, you brought up Enslaved, which is something I was actually really looking forward to talking about because I played it back then on
Oh, cool.
Xbox 360. And I thought it was a fantastic game and that it was underrated. So I guess I just want to ask how you came about working for the title and the studio itself and your experience working on that game.
Yeah, so I met Mark, who was the lead designer for that game, at an event in Middlesbrough. It's called Animex. He did a talk about Heavenly Sword at Animex, and then everyone, all the students and all of the speakers met in the bar, and I've taken along my portfolio, and we chatted, and he said, get in touch when you graduate, because he liked what he saw in my portfolio. So that's how I got in there. I think I was quite lucky, but I think I was probably the only student from our game design course that went to that thing and met people, and then people were sort of querying, like, how come you've got like a potential job offer before we're finished? And I was like, I told you all to come to this thing, it was going to be good. And like, yeah, it's something I always advocate to students, is like, try to put yourself out there as much as possible, because as much as people in industry look for talent, they're not going to be as hungry as for like, they're not going to be as excited to find you as you are to find them. So like, you have to put in the effort to sort of put yourself out there and get yourself seen.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah.
And yeah, and Enslaved was great because they gave us a lot of freedom and opportunities as junior designers. I felt like they really respected our opinions. I remember chatting to like the creative director about story beats and things like that, and it felt like they listened to you. And it was a small team. Like, for the scale of ambition that game had, you'd be surprised. I think it was about 70 people, which for a game of that scale, it's quite a small team. So you get to know everyone on the team, and you get to like learn a lot of different disciplines and things. And
Sorry, you said 70 or some?
70, yeah, or 60 or 70, I think.
Okay.
Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it was smaller, but it was definitely a shock to go from that to Naughty Dog.
But it's still like a tiny team for like a double AAA game.
Yeah, they were ambitious, and they punched above their weight. I think they've always made pretty spectacular games for the scale of like production that they have in their studio. But I did learn that if you don't know something, you can always go and ask anyone in the studio, because there's nothing that anyone likes more than feeling like they have knowledge that they can teach to people, if you know what I mean. So I remember going over to the artists and sort of like asking about like level design and like how to sort of lead the player in certain directions, and they would just put down tools and just chat to you for like 10-15 minutes, because they were very happy to give that knowledge to people. And it's something that I've always noticed throughout my career, and it's just like, never feel silly if you don't know something, because people will happily talk you through it if you aren't sure. It's really, really cool.
And it's also kind of a red flag when you see the inverse, right? But you're like, if in any good environment with people that know that enjoy their work, they'll always tell you all about it. They'll, like, if you're answering a genuine question, they'll happily show you about it. And I think the only red flags I've had in my career is when people are kind of guarded about that, and they think that you're going to take away their knowledge.
Oh yeah,
like
I
that,
can't.
right? You know,
I can't. I don't really understand that.
so like anytime that's happened, I've been like, right, okay, let's avoid that person and work with everybody else and stuff.
Yeah, well, that like it fits really well with a lot of the like mentality behind Dreams. It's like when you draw something on Photoshop, and then people are like, I can tell which tool you used here because you can see your brush strokes. So you're sort of seeing how they made rather than what they made. And that's usually regarded as a bad thing. Like if you can see, I don't know, like an NPC walking strangely through a door, you're like, I can see the path nodes now. I can see sort of like the matrix behind, and the veil of illusion is gone. Whereas with Dreams, it's completely the opposite. We want people to reverse engineer how we made things, because that's actually a really important way of teaching people how things can be made, and then they're learning whilst they're playing, if you know what I mean. So with basically our whole sculpting tool, it sort of like bears all of its secrets openly. And when you carve things with the sculpting tool, you can pretty much see which primitives people have been carving with, and it's like a completely different attitude towards how to make things, with a view to making it more understandable and easier to reverse engineer, and hopefully like encourages people to make things as well. Like they see it's not that difficult, and they can see the artist's hand imprinted on the product.
Was that something that Media Molecule had at the back of its mind? Did it want to show how games were made by making Dreams?
Oh yeah. I think even in my interview there, it was like there's a couple of conversations that I've had with key people along my like journey through Dreams, and in my interview, I remember the first half of the interview was me talking about what I'd done in my CV, and the second half of the interview was, at this point, Dreams was not a thing that people knew about. I think that they'd only had the PlayStation 4 reveal, which was pretty confusing if you saw Media Molecule's showcase there. So the second half of the interview was them trying to explain what this new project was. And a lot of the conversations were like slides of kids painting like big canvases of paint. And they're like, when people are young, they don't have any inhibitions. They don't feel like they can't draw. So they just draw whatever they want. You don't come across a child and say, can you draw this? And they say, no, I'm no good at drawing. Like that just doesn't really happen. But at some point in people's like development, they lose this confidence and they sort of gain this, I don't know, insecurity about their own ability, and they stop drawing. And maybe some people do carry on drawing, but like you meet a lot of artists in the industry and they're very insecure about their own abilities, even though they're professionals and have been working for 10 years. So it was very much about, there's a couple of like different attacks that Media Molecule were taking. And one of them was just sort of normalizing the attitude towards art. So making it messy, making it sketchy, because that's more fun to do. And also it's less intimidating. So the tool is very fluid and sketchy and very loose.
One thing that we should explain kind of what Dreams is, because I had seen some stuff of it. I'd seen there was a special secret booth at EGX Res last year that you know you had to have pre-book to go and see it, and everybody that came out with this kind of look of like, oh my god, I've just seen God and now I understand the world, you know. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but everyone that came out of it was like, oh my god, that's the most amazing, you know, the best in show thing. And I was like, I didn't get a go. And would you kind of like talk a little bit about what the background of Dreams is? Because Media Molecule are famous for Little Big Planet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Little Sackboy, who's the loveliest little creature.
So Little Big Planet is a game where you can play this sort of 2D side-scrolling platformer like Mario, but then you can also open up any level and tinker with all of the pieces, because the game that you buy contains the game, but also contains the engine that made the game. So the game was made by people like us sitting at desks using PlayStation controllers, using the tools that come with the game, and then they make the game. So that's the first part of it. So you've got a game and the tools to make the game. And then the second part of it is the community. So you can make completely brand new games using these same tools, and then you can put them up into like the community, and other people can play them, and then you can play other people's games. And it really takes on a life of its own when it becomes like a community project. And Dreams was just sort of trying to take that model and expand the create tools beyond the point of like you can make a 2D platformer. And we kind of probably like went wider than we ever expected, because at the start we were like, you can make any game, and then we realized that games encompass art, music, film, everything. So it became, you can make anything. Like we've got a really comprehensive audio tool where you can make your own music, and people have like made albums that have been put up on Spotify. And you can make short films, you can make installation art. Like I made a bunch of 3D models, and then I 3D printed them, and then made a bunch of Christmas presents for all of my family using the tool, and things like that. Like you could just, it's absolutely wild, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger, I think. So that's Dreams. It doesn't really explain it any better.
It's really difficult to explain Dreams. It really is, because I also played it at EGX, and I remember I just played small little games, I guess, that Media Molecule created. And basically I was told, hey, you can make this kind of stuff with this game. I'm like, how? I can't even, and I've used game engines before, right? I worked on games. I'm like, how do you create everything and make it easy for an average gamer to create too, right? That must have been very difficult, and it's pretty incredible, really, what you and the team have done. So, well done.
Yeah, well, that was one of the biggest challenges. So making the tool to like that works on a PlayStation controller, that does everything that we as game developers expect it to do. That was like the first thing that we did. We wanted it to be a good tool first, and then the second stab was, okay, so now we've made this tool. How do we get people to use it? So that's kind of the area that I've been in for the last couple of years, is sort of trying to, we know that we can make games that are sticky and fun and in a positive way, like quite addictive. We know how to make games that are enjoyable to play. So we can get people to play the game, but how do we convert those people from players into creators? And so we've made a lot of things that, like, basically that is Media Molecule's pillar. If anyone sort of is familiar with like pillars in game development, it's like the one guiding light that will sort of answer all your questions if you're ever stuck and unsure how to make a decision. So creativity and encouraging creativity is our pillar. And so when we make games, we've recently been making kits that we release, and they're like little like toy boxes of contraptions that everyone can sort of use to make their own games. And we'll make a game with it as well, and you can play through the game, and then you can undo the game and like tinker with it and open up every single contraption. And every contraption is built in such a way that when you open it up, it's the simplest version of this thing. So maybe it's a bounce pad, and we'll make it in a way that when you open it up, it's very easy to understand how it's been constructed, to try and sort of like be less intimidating to players. And then even our levels are actually constructed in a way that hopefully teach game design and level design. You know, like when people are starting to develop a mechanic, they'll make like a gym or a metrics level. We made metrics levels that are actually like little obstacle courses that are races, and then as you go along them, you meet these characters that sort of like explain design concepts. Like we introduce a mechanic in a safe environment first, and then later on we'll escalate the danger to the player, and then we'll introduce a new mechanic, and then later on we'll combine these two mechanics in interesting ways and things like that. And we'll just explain little design concepts to players. So all the time just hoping that if we seed enough of these like little thoughts in the player's head, that they'll sort of make the leap from a player to a creator. So you could take these levels, and you don't even need to use the create tools to make anything from scratch. You can just browse the community and stamp down all of these pre-made contraptions, and they work really nicely together. It's like a little Lego kit of like game mechanics that you can slot in together and hopefully make stuff, or you can make everything from scratch completely yourself. It's challenging, but it's definitely the area that I find most fascinating, is trying to bring that education to people that might not feel like they're capable, because we believe they probably are, and it's worthwhile trying to sort of get that message across.
It's democratizing a lot of the DCC or digital creation tools to everyone. If you've got a PlayStation, you can just create the games that you play on the PlayStation, which if you go back a few years, that cycle is completely different, right? That's like you having an account with Sony as a developer, and that's you having knowledge to like very in-depth tools and being able to somehow sign up and get a dev kit, and all of that process is now gone straight onto the tools that you have in your hand, right?
Yeah, it's such a succinct way of saying it. We're democratizing creativity, but the really exciting thing about that is it seems exciting now, but let's face it, like we didn't really need to reinvent or revolutionize the 3D platformer or the 3D walking sim. Like those things have been in development for a long time, and professional developers have like honed those skills. But very soon, I think in a couple of weeks, we're releasing the VR pack, and we're going to like democratize VR development, which is in its infancy, and people are still working out what the protocols are on, like how to make good like VR games. And all of a sudden we're going to like blow that wide open, and like everyone that's got a PlayStation has a VR dev kit, and I think that's just going to be wild.
I've had one question about Dreams, and it's a personal one. I really want to play the game, but it's mostly a creator tool, and I struggle with creator tools because my actual work is using tools to make games. So how would you sell that game to me?
Well, I mean, you're a game developer, so it's almost like you probably won't get a lot of stuff out of it that other people would. I think there is a lot of interesting stuff in there. Like there's an infinite amount of interesting mechanics and ideas and prototypes that are being thrown around, and the community is really wholesome and welcoming. And I think a lot of people, like, I prototype my games in Dreams now because it's just faster.
Oh, wow.
And it's more fun, and I can do it on my couch.
I saw a video that you did for, and I'm going to get this wrong because I'm very bad at memorizing things, but you did a level design video that you're explaining, and then I went, what's he using? Because he seems to be like, oh, he's actually using Dreams to explain all of this.
So because Dreams has to sort of compete with very professional tools, we have to make it more appetizing and pleasing to look at, I think, because it has to sort of basically be, Unreal or Unity, but it also is a first-party PlayStation game. So we've put a lot of effort into the visuals, and I would say if you're sort of like whiteboxing or like blocking out a level, there is nothing more satisfying than just putting a couple of white cubes in there, and then the lighting engine from Dreams just instantly makes it look kind of wonderful, and that makes it easier to sort of carry on building. And I think visually it's very easy to get to a place that is very satisfying with Dreams much faster than other engines. So that's why I prototype in it, because a lot of my ideas are very throwaway and very silly. But you can sit down with your kids and you can make games. Like I've made a game with my kids before, and it's really fun to do that kind of thing. I think the accessibility makes it good for prototyping.
You mentioned other engines. How do you feel about Unreal or Unity now after working on Dreams, which is basically, let's just say, a game engine?
I kind of love them. Like, I still have a special place for them. Like, Unreal was the first engine that I learned when I first went to Ninja Theory, and then when the programmers were developing the Dreams engine, we prototyped in Unity because it's a bit more flexible. Like, we learned Lua so that we could I can't remember, we learned C#, I think. Because you have C#, you can prototype different mechanics a lot quicker than I could have done in Unreal. So I love those tools. I use them a lot, but in terms of jamming and making things fast, I think I'd find it quite tricky to go back. Maybe I've just like painted myself into a corner, or like go and apply for a job and then be like, oh, we don't use Dreams. I'm like, oh, I'm useless now. I can't do anything.
If I was starting out and if I made games in Dreams and had them in my portfolio, I would feel like, yeah, this is indeed a valid game engine to use to make your own stuff and have them in your portfolio. Or do you feel like you'd accept that from junior developers if they want to break into the industry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would hope so, but I think that's almost a question where I'd be really interested to hear what you two think, because like, from my point of view, I've always valued ideas and execution over sort of like technical tool knowledge, because I feel like if you find someone that is a really good designer and they have really good design ideas, you can teach them any tool. It'll take a little bit of time, but like the speed at which people learn tools is roughly the same, but this, like, somebody's design intuitions are crafted over a lifetime of experiences. So that's how I would view it. But how do you two feel? Like, if you saw a portfolio with Dreams levels that were like really nicely crafted?
Peter, we're interviewing you, not the other way around.
Sorry.
I'm kidding. Mark, you can start, and I have an opinion on that too, actually.
Okay. I think that changes the conversation, because it doesn't change. If you have knowledge, you then say, now we do everything in Blender. We've moved to, companies move technology all the time, and I'm gonna point to Blender, but let's say, I don't know, I'm not experiencing this, but Maya, from Maya version X to version Y. I did 3D Studio before it was Max, and it converted to Max, right? That's a learning curve. There's a learning curve there, right? Now, so if someone comes to you knowing how to make a torus, right, in one package, their question isn't like, what is a torus? Their question is how do I make a torus in your package? That makes sense. So if they've already got the knowledge, or how do I build a level in your tool is the question. It doesn't become like, what's a level?
Yes.
What's a good level, right? It just becomes a mechanic question. Is I think what I'm trying to get. By mechanics, I don't mean game mechanics. I mean what's the actual technical implementation way of doing it. And I guess in the game industry as well, people are always moving around to different shops that have their own engines that you couldn't have known unless you worked for that company, right? I mean, I'm guessing like Decima, for example, is it Hideo Kojima's one, is Decima engine?
Yeah, it came from Guerrilla, but
Guerrilla, as an example, or Frostbite, right? There's no way you can know how to use that before you're going there. So if you turn up going, look, I made these levels in this tool called Dreams that are great. Now, the only thing that would have a question is, are they great because they're made in Dreams, or are they great because of what you did? Do you know what I mean? It's your skill.
Yeah, if you can discern between those two things, then I guess you can work out if they're a good applicant. Yeah.
But that's my job. That's not the interviewee's job. Right? That's not the...
Well, I mean, partly they have to put their talents first and foremost, like, put them out there. But you're right. It's everyone's job to work that out, really, isn't it?
I think you already know my take on this because, well, I was also interviewed for the Level Design podcast at one point, and I talked about how I created a game in PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I didn't.
That was great.
I didn't have that exactly on my. I don't have that now on my portfolio. I did have it back then.
Well, Red Dead Redemption kind of like goes a little bit over the PowerPoint game, but
who knows?
Well, who
have
knows?
you ever played my PowerPoint game?
I have not, Valentina. That is true. I look forward to trying it.
Well, but yeah. So to be honest, for me, is if you can use any tool to articulate your ideas and create something, that's acceptable. And I would even encourage it because we can use text-based tools too and create a little text-based adventure, right? And maybe that's what interests you, but then you make this amazing story and like great experience in it. And that's more important than finding out how to, I don't know, use materials in Unreal because you want to build something and that's not part of your role, and then you're just battling with a lot of things, whereas you need to show your skill in its purest form. And if you can use Dreams to do that, and if your passion is in level design and you make these incredible levels in it, then I think it's still a great showcase of skill.
I have an analogy of this, which is yak shaving. I always say, like, you're trying to... Yak shaving is what you find yourself doing when you wanted to just replace the batteries in your PC, for example. You have to find a screwdriver, then you go and find it. You realize that to get to the screwdriver, you have to go and open up a cupboard somewhere, and to do that cupboard, you have to do something else. And before you know it, you're standing in the Himalayas shaving a yak going, yeah, I wanted to change the battery in my PC, right?
You've just untangled this massive web of tasks that...
Yeah. I mean, and if you explain it to somebody, they think you're insane because it's like, well, they had to get to here to get to this, to get to this, to get to this. Now, that's, I think, the level that you get with some tools. But if you're able to shorten that distance of being able to get something out, like as Valentina's saying, it's like you're just trying to do like a decal on something. And if you try to do it in Blender, it's like this massive thing. But if you can do it in Dreams, you've done the job that you were trying to achieve. Make it easy. Sell the idea of a barrel with an explosive sign on it. Whatever. That's the goal, not how you get there.
Yeah. A fun little story is like when I was interviewing at Naughty Dog, they use a scripting language. Maybe they use Lua. Anyway, Lua is somewhere in my past. But that was part of the design test. At the interview, they took me over and they were like, oh, can you script? Because we script. And then so they sat me down at a computer and they were like, so if these two lines mean this thing, what does this next line mean? And I promise you, I've never scripted in my life. And I failed that little section of the interview so badly. But like, I think it's just a testament to the fact that like other areas of my interview went better. So they were like, it's worth a shot. He'll learn to script. It'll take him a little while, but it'll be okay. And that was pretty much my Uncharted 3 experience, was like struggling with scripting and then getting that game out the door. And then The Last of Us was me actually scripting. So I don't know. Yeah, I've always appreciated people taking a punt on people if they feel like they have potential. Yeah. That's like a nice thing to do.
I think it's like we all have to know that people have capability. So, saying, do you know how to do this very specific thing? You might not be able to do it, but you can sometimes tell people will be able to understand it. They'll be able to probably do it really well. Just that.
Yeah, especially if you're hiring. I think if you're hiring junior developers, you should be looking for their potential rather than what they can do at that moment, because none of us can work in Frostbite or whatever Naughty Dog uses, or those things we're going to learn. And if you have the capabilities to learn and be a team player and all those soft skills basically, and if you have those, I think you can more easily be part of that team and learn the tools on the job.
And like going back to Dreams, like a lot of the game is about telling people that don't think they have those skills that they do have those skills, or like being a bit of a Trojan horse and sneaking in and being like, you like to play games, actually you didn't know, but you could be potentially amazing at making games. Like we take Dreams, I started by taking Dreams to university courses and sort of and showing it there, and there was something really strange about that experience where you're taking a game that is designed to encourage people to make games to a place where people already know they want to make games. I was like, I'm preaching to the converted. These people have already decided that they are capable of making games and they've taken steps to make that happen. So I need to go younger and sort of find people that might want to make games but have disregarded it as an opportunity because for whatever reason. So I've taken it to like, we did like events at Ali Pali with BAFTA and like 1,000 school kids, and we showed them the game. And I take it to schools as well. Like I've run like a 10-week game making after school club at like a school and things like that. And we've done various events, and it's been a really, really interesting experience, because initially I was thinking that you would just take it to people and everyone would be like very open to the idea. But I think the younger the students got, the more I realized that these preconceptions about what people think they're capable of and what they're not capable of and what jobs are appropriate for them and what jobs are not appropriate for them, like happen quite young. So for example, I was doing like a game design course with a bunch of year sevens, and I was chatting to like a female IT teacher. She was like, I'd love to get more girls into tech because they just don't go near this stuff and they're very capable. So she was like, I'm going to round them all up and we're going to like have a lesson. I'm going to get the smartest girls and we're going to make games together for like 10 weeks. And like lesson 1 comes around and it's just all boys. And she was like, I tried. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting and like kind of heartbreaking. But yeah, I do feel like Dreams is in a unique position where it's accessible and it's powerful. So I want to try and use it to take it to places where we can show kids that this is an option for them, and games needs more diversity, and it just full stop. And I'm just really kind of at the moment not entirely sure how to sort of get it to that audience before they decide for themselves that it's not for them. But that's kind of something I'm quite passionate about looking into at the moment.
Yeah, so Dreams is not just a work project for you. You also have some personal interest in it because of that aspect that it can offer. It can teach people to make games, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Where does that passion for you come from?
I don't know. Like, it's always been part of that, but I think it has literally come from conversations when I had my interview and Kareem was talking about how like creativity is in all of us, and it's a very therapeutic and calming thing that people can do even if it's as a hobby, but we have the like privilege of being able to do it as a job. Like it's just a really good healthy thing to do to like for people to have a hobby like that, and a lot of people just say that they're not talented so they can't draw. So if you imagine like that thing that I was talking about where kids will never say they're bad at drawing, they'll just have a go, and then at some point someone draws a picture and it's not very good. Of course it's not very good, it's the first thing they ever drew, and then they come back and they don't draw for a while because they don't like doing it because they're not good at it, and they come back a year later and they draw again and they've not improved. It's still bad because they haven't practiced, and they just decide that they're not talented. And I really like I think it might have been Alex Evans actually who was sort of explaining that the word talent is quite a dangerous thing in at least the way that we understand it, because it can make you lock off entire swathes of opportunities because you say you're not talented, but really a much bigger factor is practice. So like you see these blogs online where people post like a drawing a day for 10 years and it starts off like a stick figure, and by the end of it it's like, it's like Renaissance art. It's absolutely incredible. And so he was saying that like, sure, like talent might be a factor in it, but a much more important factor is, and a part that you can control, is practice. So if you practice every day, you will get better, and then that will reinforce that learning circle. So it will be like, I got better, which makes me feel better about what I've done, which means I'll do it again, which means I'll get better, which means I'll do it again, which means I'll get better. So that whole mentality is like wrapped up in Dreams from like the inception. So we're trying to make this thing that is so enjoyable to use that people don't realize they're learning. And then when they sort of spend 10 hours with a game, which is kind of, you know, roughly how long people spend with a game, they'll actually look back at their first creation and be like, I've improved, I've got better at this. And then they'll get that addictive feeling. It's like taking all of the horrible, insidious, like addictive mechanics that people don't like about mobile games and then pouring it into a thing that's like a much more worthy cause. We're going to try and make people addicted to creating because that will benefit them. It's really weird. It's such a strange sort of like attitude towards game development, but I've really learned so much from like Media Molecule and how their sort of philosophies about making games. It's just so wild.
That is amazing. Yeah.
It's that whole concept of the 10,000 hours for any skill, right?
Yes.
There's no such thing as talent. You have guitarists that play 3 chords, but after years and years and years, they're getting better. They're practicing. They're doing that as the thing that you do every day. So the 10,000 hours is like, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. Which is,
yeah, I've heard that
I
too.
can't
Yeah,
remember the proper saying, but I think this goes for anything.
Yeah.
It's like I suck at drawing, but I don't think it's a lack of talent, although that I have any talent in it. Is application. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I bet you if I spent 10,000 hours drawing a single line, I'd be awesome, right? Like
That line is gonna be like perfect.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be like straight
Absolutely.
as. People are going to go, oh, look at that top and tail. It's going to be brilliant.
What I love about that idea as well is it kind of doesn't even matter if it's like how accurate that idea is. It's always the most productive way to look at any situation because you'll always have a go. If you think that like effort and time and practice outweighs like inherent talent, then like no matter how bad you are or how good you are, you'll have another go. And it's not about making everyone into a professional game designer. It's about making people giving people this creative outlet that can be more enriching and more fulfilling for their lives. Like, I'm not saying that everyone is going to be Hideo Kojima, but people might have a hobby that they really get a lot out of, and that's really cool. Like, I make dumb games with my kids all the time, and I'm not going to put them up on my portfolio, but like we have a really great time doing it, you know? It's like, it's really, it's cool.
And I think something else, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, that Dreams provides is that when you first start making something, it can prove very difficult and it can prove discouraging because you start from a blank page basically, and your skills are very poor at that point, whereas Dreams gives you the tools and it makes the transition a bit easier and quicker, so you can make something and it will look and it might feel good. You can make that in an hour, in 10 minutes, however long it takes you, and it won't discourage you. You'll look at that and say, yeah, I can actually make something, and then you keep building that. And I think that's why a lot of people are discouraged from and say, oh, I don't have the talent, because they hear it takes 10,000 hours to become like great at something. So that's intense. 10,000 hours is intense. Let's start with the first hour, and I think that's what Dream provides.
Yeah, it provides you the first 10 hours
Yeah.
that you then get something really cool out of.
It's just like a nice foundation so that you, because I think you always learn faster when you initially find a new avenue of learning, don't you? I've always found like I'm kind of, I don't know, I probably spin this in my favor, but I've always been like, I'm kind of okay at a lot of things rather than an expert at anything. And I think that's because I really enjoy that initial sort of buzz of learning something new, but it's probably because I haven't got the concentration power to stick at one thing.
Peter, there's one more thing that I want to talk about before we wrap this episode up. And, you know, we talked about Enslaved, which was kind of still a beautiful and cheerful game, and Dreams, which is also obviously very cheerful and fun. But what about that very tragic game that you worked on called The Last of Us?
I thought that was a
know,
really cheerful little ditty, you know. It's got...
Yeah.
Oh,
So I know a lot of people want to hear about that. I have a lot of questions, but the main one is like, how was it working on The Last of Us compared to, I don't know, Dreams? If you think about it, it's just very, very different, right?
Yeah, it's so different. And I would say that like I think Dreams scratches an itch for me, which is sort of like it's completely positive, like non-violent. It's like a really healthy sort of that side of things is definitely where I intentionally go. But yeah, I actually fit really well with The Last of Us. I had some of the less violent levels. I think I had like a serene moment in a bus station with a giraffe, which was sort of my happy place if I was getting too sort of like bogged down in violence and gore. So I'd just go there and just like work on that level a little bit. But also like I think the Last of Us is unique in that like it's hard to remember now, but
Mm-hmm.
before The Last of Us came out, the post-apocalypse looked like a
Yeah,
nuclear
Borderlands.
wasteland, and it was a very
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So its take on the apocalypse was actually like a really vibrant, hopeful one. And every time you see the desolation of the remnants of humans sort of dying out, they're essentially sort of like dwindling into non-existence at this point in the story. It like the contrast of that is nature is thriving and flourishing and filling that void and taking back this place and growing. So wherever there is sort of like darkness, there's also sort of like light and hope, and I think that was always like a fun thing to build into the game.
Do you think that Enslaved also achieved that? Because Enslaved was also focused on the nature in the world, right? It was this bright
Yeah.
and
Oh
colorful
yeah, that's
game.
true.
It didn't focus on this Fallout style or like when it wasn't bleak. It was bright and like colorful. It had flowers. It had everything. So how did you work on Enslaved? And then obviously you work on The Last of Us. Did you find that Enslaved helped you in any way to, I don't know, mentally prepare for The Last of Us?
I think probably I think it probably was a big part of why me and Mark were sort of like they took a punt on me. I mean, I was quite junior when I went to Naughty Dogs, but
I should point out the other Mark, not this Mark.
yeah,
There was
sorry, Mark
others.
Davies, who was like the lead game designer on Enslaved, and they took him over to Naughty Dog, and he actually went straight onto like pre-production on The Last of Us, and that was definitely a sort of like, oh, you've made this type of game, you totally get this kind of thing,
Mm.
and then I followed, but I had to earn my stripes on Uncharted 3 first, which is like a big
Mm-hmm.
trial by fire. But yeah, I think that did mentally prepare me. I think it's always been something that I just like, not disregarding the whole natural side of the world. You know what I mean? I think it's important to sort of try and understand how humanity would collapse if like and nature would take its place. Like we are not the be all and end all of this planet, and do you know what I mean?
Wasn't that based on there was a TV series or a TV documentary called Life After Humans that would go like 10,000 years into the future, but it starts off like going like, if all humans died tomorrow, this is what in 2 weeks it would look like. I guess it's a documentary, it's a factual and
Mm-hmm.
postulative scientific thing, but
It was definitely passed around the office as like a reference point. But I think also like I don't know, just going for walks in England, you see dilapidated buildings and ruins and things
right.
like that, and like occasionally you'll see like a medieval sort of like wall and things like that. Like I don't know, it's not. I think watching that just vindicated a lot of ideas that we already knew inherently, but found it hard to articulate. So that kind of thing always helps with that kind of. It's everywhere. You can just go for a walk and see this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially now with like nobody has been mowing lawns or like maintaining public spaces. You just walk around and it feels like The Last of Us at the
Yeah,
moment.
it does feel that
Yeah.
right. Isn't it?
It's kind of funny, you know. It's kind of funny. We actually have a global pandemic. Okay, so no cordyceps to
Yeah,
chase us around, but I've just finished The Last of Us 2, and I'm just thinking it's kind of off its time because it's pre-COVID.
yeah.
I'm wondering what the next apocalyptic game is going to look like, knowing what we know now. Kind of, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was definitely sort of I was playing it whilst all of this whole lockdown thing was going on, and there was a couple of like weirdly sort of nice things that I would notice about lockdown. It's obviously like a horrible, horrific thing, but because we were locked down to, we could only go out for walks. That we couldn't go out in the car, and something that I noticed that was really nice is we learned our local area so much more thoroughly, and we found local walks and countryside, like I don't know, gems and things like that, like really nice little areas that we would never have discovered if we hadn't been forced to walk around our local area without a car. So it was just like that was really, really lovely, I think.
It's like the fireflies say, actually I forgot the quote, but it's something about light through the darkness, or you find the light in the darkness, or something like that, right?
I can't remember, I'm sorry. I meant to know.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised, Valentina. You're really up on it.
It's all right. It's okay. And I think on that note, through the bleakness into the light, Peter, it was lovely having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. I would love to talk to you even more. Could you please let our listeners know where they can reach you online in case they have any questions or they just want to praise you on your work?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's Peter and then 2 underscores and then Field. I think that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
That's cool. And I'm sure all our listeners know where to reach Mark at this point, but can you please reiterate again for any new listeners that might have joined the show?
All right, so you can hit me up on Twitter, and Mark is on holiday. It's Mark Drew, at Mark Drew on the Twitters. Shoot us any questions about the episode if you want. We have lots more episodes that you should, subscribe, right? You have to tell people to subscribe.
Thank you for listening, everyone. And if you did enjoy this episode, please make sure to follow us, share it, and leave a big thumbs up or whatever it is the cool kids do these days. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode because I was the host, please make sure to rub that into Mark's face. Until then, take care.
Okay, bye. The Level Design Podcast has been a Command Studio production. Our editor is Matthew Lever, and this episode has been produced by Bridie Rose.